Our last item tonight is a study session on the Sherwin Williams project, Sherwin Williams mixed-use project. Can we have the staff report, please?
Okay, good evening. So today's the day where we have at least a couple of study sessions. So this is a second study session as well. On Sherwin Williams, as you know, I'm sure you know very well by now where Sherwin Williams is. It's an 8.5-acre site and a site of the former paint company which ceased its operations back in 2006. The remediation was completed in January of last year, and at this point there are no restrictions on the type of land use on this property. In terms of background, so we were here almost about a year ago with the study session for this project. Then in the same year, it went to the City Council for a study session. After that, the applicant went back to the drawing board. They had some changes in the applicant team, which they will be talking about, and they filed an application this year in the fall. Since the filing of the application, the submittal has been reviewed by the BPAC and the Parks and Recreation Committee earlier this month, and we have the Planning Commission study session now. And it is anticipated that the City Council will see the proposal that you're going to see today in January. The staff report says that the City Council would see it in December, but due to some scheduling issues, it has been pushed out to the January study session for the City Council. So just to remind you, this is what you saw last year for the study session. Horton Street is on the top of the screen. Here's the railroad. And here's Sherwin. And the existing building along Horton Street was to be retained as office, and the rest of the site was organized around a central green. There were going to be 3 new parcels, and the total count was 460 units, 70,000 square feet of office in the existing building, and 15,000 square feet of retail, mostly along the ground floor on both sides of the greenway, of the central green, sorry. So this sort of looks at, again, the 2013 in terms of how it would look in terms of height. So the existing building, of course, is about 42 feet. The new buildings, the 2 new buildings along would attain a maximum height of 75 feet. And the tallest building would be this parcel D, where the proposal was that it would go as high as 100 feet. So just to remind you again, in terms of with the comments that you provided at that time, you felt that the proposed mix of uses was acceptable. You recommended active uses in form of commercial or live work spaces be accommodated on both sides of the central green on the ground floor. You said that the proposed parcels were too big and needed to be broken up. Alternative approach to the garages be considered. Buildings to be no taller than 7 to 9 stories on the north and 6 stories for the rest. There was a desire to see building designs that were modern and industrial in look with use of brick and steel rather than multicolored stucco buildings. There was a desire to see family-friendly and mixed-income housing units. And it was suggested that the applicant should work on their TDM measures now so that they could be analyzed as part of the traffic study. So last year, again, just as a reminder, our City Council comments that were made on this old proposal. They felt that there was a need to consolidate all open areas to create one bigger and more usable open area. As a result of this comment, there was a concern expressed of having proposed open areas in shade, which led to the suggestion of land swap with the city that owns the parcel adjacent to the railroad. They also suggested more east-west connections, similar to yours. They wanted to include a certain percentage of affordable housing units. They favored the use of local labor for construction and suggested that the applicant look into having labor agreements that would include fair wages and opportunities for youth training. And as a result of the comments that were received by the applicant, by this body, and in the city council, the applicant has responded regarding the desire to see the city parcel swap for open space. The applicant has now proposed two options. One, which includes the swap decided by the city council, and one without the swap. And this is because the time frame for the city parcel's availability for development is unclear at this time. So the idea is that the both proposals will be processed and analyzed, and decision-making bodies, yourself included, and the city council will consider both the proposals for approval. Now, the selection of which options will be pursued is contingent on the long-range property management plan prepared by the city as a successor agency to the redevelopment agency, and the ability of the developer and the city to agree on a land deal for the swap. Other ways that the applicant has responded to the comments is that parcels B and C have been broken up to create more east-west connectors, and you'll see that in a minute. And the building heights of parcels along Sherwin Avenue and Horton Avenue are stepped down to 55 feet along the street frontage. So this is the proposed option A. So it's kind of twisted now. You have Horton at the bottom, and this is the railroad. We have Sherwin here. As this is the existing building, which will be retained. So this parcel has been broken up. A new street, the new 46th Street, has been created. The central green has been maintained, and the parcel C has been split into two. And you can see the incorporation of the park area here, and this would be the city parcel where you have a residential building. In terms of heights, existing building remains the same. So the buildings facing Sherwin Avenue, you can see that the frontages are stepped down to 55 feet, and the rest of the building is proposed to be as tall as 75 feet. The same is the case for this building, building B2 along Horton. Again, it is stepped down to 55 feet, and the highest would be 75. This building does not step down since it's fronting the central green, and so does this. So this is 100 feet, and this would be 75 feet. Option B, as you can see, the city park is in the location where the city parcel is, and the rest of the proposal is pretty much the same, except that these two parcels are connected, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. In terms of total units, and the heights is the same thing, stepped down along the building frontages on Sherwin and Horton, and the remaining heights of the buildings remain the same as option 1. So that's 100 feet here, 75 feet for the other buildings. So in terms of mix of uses between the 2013 proposal and the current proposal, you can see the current proposal is slightly bigger. Just to note, both proposals are identical in terms of the mix of uses, so that does not change. So both A and B will have 540 units, about 79,600 square feet of office, and about 15,000 square feet of commercial. So they have increased the number of units by 90 and increased the non-residential commercial, non-residential square footage by about 20,000 square feet. Now, mix of uses by parcel. This is the proposal. Again, this is identical for both the options. So parcel A is the existing building, so that will be used for office. Parcel B1, that is the one that is, let's just go back real quick. So parcel B1 is here, fronting Sherwin Avenue. B2 would be Horton Street, and then the C1 would be fronting Sherwin Avenue, and then C2 and parcel D. So in terms of what each parcel is included. So parcel B1 has 175 units. It's got a ground floor restaurant space of about 5,000 and an additional 7,000 square feet of ground floor retail space or residential amenity, and this would be fronting the central green. Parcel B2 includes 58 units, and this is the parcel fronting Horton, and it will have a ground floor office space for about 5,600, but most of the building would be a parking garage. As you can see, the parking spaces is about nearly a little under 500 spaces there. Parcel C1, this is the one facing Sherwin Avenue. It has 104 units. Parcel C2, next to it, has 128 units, a bit of ground floor retail, 3,000 square feet. Parcel D, that's the tallest building, will have 75 units, and the rest of it would be parking. In terms of vehicular circulation, now between the two options, vehicular circulation is what is different. So this is option A, and you can see how where the garage entrances are for this parcel. They occur off Sherwin Avenue, and for parcel B, it occurs here. The new street will be used to access these two parcels, and here's the garage entry for parcel D, and here's the entry for parcel C2. This is different in option B. As you can see, parcel C will be accessed fundamentally through 46th Street, and these two parcels are connected, so that's how the circulation will occur. Other details will be, I'm not going to go into it in terms of open space and details of that and how much, how big they are. I'm going to let the applicant go into the details of that. I would just like to focus now in terms of conformity of this plan with the land use policies. So the land use designation is MUR and open space. The site is over 5 acres, so a PUD is required. And the MUR district requires a mix of uses for a PUD, one of which must be residentials. The other mix of uses, the regulations do not specify an exact mix. The mix is to be determined by yourself and the city council. So what is being proposed is residential plus a little under 80,000 square feet of office and 15,000 square feet of retail. The net developable area on this site is about 5.3 acres. So in terms of residential density, so what is allowed is 85 units per acre by right, which can be increased to 100 units with a bonus. So this, for this site, calculates to 451 units by right and 530 units with a bonus. What they have proposed is 540 units, so the project needs to reduce the unit count by 10 to comply with the bonus density that is permitted. And if they reduce it to 530, they would need a bonus points of 100. In terms of FAR, what is allowed is 2 by right and 3 with a bonus. What they are proposing is 3.2. Again, the project needs to reduce the non-residential area by 50,000 square feet to comply with the bonus FAR allowed. In terms of height, it is 55 for the southern portion by right, which can be increased to 75 feet. There's an error there, sorry about that. What they are proposing is for parcels B and C, it's 75 feet, and parcel D is up to 100 feet. So this is permitted, and they will need to provide public benefits or the bonus points worth 100 bonus points. In terms of bonus points, as I have mentioned earlier in different projects, it is not necessary to earn separate points in each category. The project will need 100 points, and they have identified the following bonus categories at this time. Reuse of a significant building will give them 35 points. They're proposing a TDM program, which would include bicycle sharing. That will give them 15 points. Bike lockers, 10 points. Electronic transit information signs, another 10 points. They have identified family-friendly housing, which means that 5% of total units on this site would be family-friendly, and what, in terms of bonus, it means is all of them, these units would have to have 3-bedroom units. There should be laundry hookups within each unit, and there are certain amount of open space and private space, which is what constitutes family-friendly for the bonus purposes. So that would earn them 10 points. They are also proposing to have electrical vehicle charging stations, and that will give them 20 points. So this adds up to 90 points. They are short of 10 points, so there's something that they need to figure out what they want to do. In terms of parks and greenway, in addition to a public park of approximately 2 acres, the general plan calls for the greenway to traverse this parcel to connect between Horton Landing Park to the north and the Park Avenue District Bay Trail to the south. The project does provide the 2 acres of open space in both the options in form of central green and a plaza area. And in addition, the project includes the design and construction of the park one way or the other on the city-owned parcel adjacent to the railroad and the extension of the greenway from the Horton Landing Park to Sherwin Avenue. In terms of street design, the key thing that I would like to point out is that the proposed new 46th Street is 52 feet wide, while our design standard for a local street is 60 feet. So the project will need to be modified to comply with the standard. The project was reviewed by DCC. Some of the comments that were made was that the applicant could assist in funding the acquisition and cleanup of Parcel C, which is part of the Phase 2 of the Horton Landing Park, to qualify for the additional bonus points that they do need. There was a desire expressed to see a wider central green. It was noted that plans should include light poles so that it is coordinated with the tree spacing throughout the project. They show a fence along the railroad edge. This would need to match the corresponding fences along Bay Street and IKEA. The parcel should include use of reclaimed water, as East Bay Mud's reclaimed water line runs up Horton Street. This went to the BPAC earlier this month. They were generally satisfied with the overall plan and had a preference for option A. They recommended that ground-level bike parking be provided within each building. They also suggested that the traffic calming measures should be incorporated in the design of the streets. They felt that they suggested consideration of streetcar as an option instead of Emery go-around. At the Parks and Recreation Committee, the committee generally liked the project's open and recreation areas in terms of location and the size. They felt that the central green should include tables and seating areas, as this was probably going to be used more as a social space. A preference for tennis courts was noted, as the city does not have any public tennis courts. So all the open areas in both the options, including areas that are designated for active spaces like the courts, would be open to the entire public and not just to the residents. So all open areas will be open and accessible for everybody to use. They suggested that all the green or the turf areas be provided with electrical outlets to avoid use of generators for movie screenings or any of the children's events that might need electrical hookups. So moving forward, the staff has hired LSA Associate to conduct environmental analysis, and they will be doing the CEQA review for this project. We expect to do an EIR. And in terms of permits required, it will need a PUD and a general plan amendment, and the project will require approval from both the Planning Commission and the City Council. So this body will be making a recommendation to the City Council for the final approval. In terms of what we would like to hear from you today and give us direction on is the proposed siting of parcels and buildings. Are they acceptable to you? Is the proposed circulation and layout of the streets appropriate for the site? Is the siting and sizes of open space acceptable? What type of open spaces do you wish to see in the central green and the park areas? Are the proposed height and massing acceptable? And are the proposed bonus categories acceptable? And of course, any other issues. So that concludes my presentation. I would like to point out a letter that is in front of you. It is a letter from a citizen, from Mr. John, I'm not sure how to, Bouters, I'm not sure I'm saying that right, but a copy of that is at the dais. So if you have any questions from me, I would be happy to answer. Of course, the applicant has a
What is the
presentation.
status of the bike bridge, which is adjacent to this?
You know, Charlie, do we have a status?
I believe the funding for that is still in question. It's still in litigation with the State Department of Finance, over former redevelopment money. As you may know, we won in lower court, and then they appealed that. So that appeal is still wending its way through the courts.
So if there are no more questions.
Oh, I have several questions.
Okay, go ahead.
So first of all, in speaking on kind of that same subject of the state, if the state was to win in court and the land swap fails, could this force the sale of the current state-owned property, which
excuse
then
me.
I'm
would...
sorry.
Commissioner Keller, those are two different issues.
No, this is about the park and the land swap. I want to know what would happen
But
if
we're
that-
not in litigation with the state about the land swap.
or not.
No, we're in litigation with the state about the bridge.
Okay, so do we
land
own
swap
this
is-
the property in the land swap?
Anticipate possible litigation over our property management plan, of which the parcel that would be subject to the swap is part of that plan.
Okay.
But
So then my question is it possible that we will not be able to swap that land out and that we may have to do something different with that land that would preclude us from making it open space? That's the crux of my question.
Unlikely.
Unlikely. So if we had to go with parcel or with option B, we would still have pretty certain guarantees that we would get a park on that spot, that we wouldn't have to sell that property and develop it?
There are no guarantees, but I mean, it is unlikely. There is a possibility, and I can't give you a percentage, where that is on the scale, that that the city may be required to sell its parcel and divide the proceeds to the taxing entities.
That's what I was understanding and I'm concerned with.
Right. I
But,
mean,
go ahead.
no.
But if we were to do that, if we were required to do that, whoever were to buy that parcel would basically have to build a park because it's zoned for open space.
Okay.
Unless the state told us we had to rezone it for something else.
Well, and that's just it. To get back to your issue, even if in the worst case scenario, the city were required to sell the parcel and divide the proceeds among the taxing entities, the fact remains that that parcel would still hold the zoning designation of open space. So the buyer of that parcel, whoever it may be, would, the options for development on that site would still essentially be constrained by the requirement of the open space designation.
Okay. So question two, in looking at the plan, I'm still kind of perplexed and confused why we're not using Halleck Street as an extension behind parcel C for parking access. This would work with both option A and B. It would create an additional access point to move vehicles off the other streets. More so, it would eliminate the pedestrian auto conflict that would be created between buildings C1 and C2 if option B was selected. Why are we not looking at Halleck Street as at least a driveway, if not a street?
Perhaps it may be better if you actually hear the applicant's presentation first. Your question may be answered.
Okay.
by
Okay.
that.
And if it's not, I'll bring it up
Yeah,
again.
yes.
Okay, and then there's some talk about some general plan amendment changes to designations of property on there. Can you kind of bring up that map and kind of explain to us which ones have to be changed and why?
Well, okay, let's see.
Because other than the city-owned property, I didn't know that we had any land designations that needed to be changed for this project.
Well, when we create a PUD, that itself is a general plan amendment,
Okay?
because the so for
But it's talking about moving some MURs to something else,
The
and,
entire northern portion of the Sherwin Williams site is designated for open space.
okay,
So that building that they're showing up there with the sports courts to the north of it, that's in an open space zone
okay.
and designated as open space on the general plan. So they can't build a building there. So they would have to swap that open space designation with open space elsewhere on the site. There you go.
Okay.
That's the zoning and also the general plan designation of the site. So that whole northern portion of the site that's green, they can't build anything there
Okay, that's so
unless
weird,
they
'cause I remember-
amend the general plan.
I remember in working with the general plan that we specified that particular area for this additional height. So why would we have
Right.
zoned up for a different height if we're making it green space? Just what we
Maybe
did?
that was in anticipation of a future land swap.
So what we
A
would do
future,
is,
it's not a land swap, a future redesignation.
okay, so we would swap some of this green space for some of the non-green space within the project.
Correct.
Okay, that's
This,
the-
by the way, this open space designation dates way back.
Okay.
It's 20, 30 or more years that parcel up at the north end of the Sherwin-Williams has been designated for open space. So when we did the new general plan, we didn't want to change that. We didn't want to lose that open space. So we just left it there kind of as a holding pattern, knowing that it might get moved around in the future, but we wanted to retain that amount of open space.
Sounds logical. Okay, so going on down, looking at the project, you say that they're over by 10 units in their residential and over quite a bit, 50,000 square feet in their commercial or other uses. What does it take for that amount of residential and commercial to get approved? Are we talking another general plan amendment?
They cannot even apply. They have to comply with the bonus maximum.
Well, the short answer is yes. It could be done with a general plan amendment, but you'd have to reduce the amount of open space then.
Oh, okay.
I mean, at the end of the day, the city council can change anything,
Yeah.
right? But we would certainly not encourage the applicant to go in that direction.
That's what I'm curious about, is why have they proposed something that's really not likely to happen unless we go all the way to city council and amend the general
We'll
plan?
have to ask them.
Okay.
Wait,
No, I have a few more, but if you want to interject, go ahead.
I just want to ask a follow-up question, if I may. Does that mean there's no higher general plan, there's no general plan designation with a higher density than what the site has?
Well, actually, yeah, you're right. They don't necessarily have to reduce the amount of open space. They could ask for a general plan amendment to a higher FAR and a higher residential density category.
But again, we have no reason to support something such a proposal because, our general plan is relatively new. So unless there's a really good reason, it's not something that staff would be encouraging the applicant to go in that direction. We would ask them to reduce by the density and the FAR.
I'm just kind of confused looking at the plan, particularly option A with the parcels and the green space and stuff. Is that plan not showing us what they're proposing in terms of the number of units and the number of commercial spaces? So is this less green space than we want, or that is?
No, what they've done is to put within the tan areas where that's option B, but it amounts
same
Oh, sorry.
difference.
to the same thing.
It doesn't matter, yeah.
The amount of stuff that they've put in the tan areas is more than is allowed.
But yet it's within the height restrictions.
Yeah?
Okay, I'm just like
Well,
confused
there's
how
not
it
a
fits in here, but yet it doesn't.
Well, FAR and height and residential density are three different things, and there's not necessarily a direct correlation between them all. You could build a box that completely filled up the site and went all the way up to the height limit. If you did that, that box would most likely have more floor area than what the FAR allowed. And the purpose of FAR is to kind of whittle that box down into a shape that is more user-friendly, shall we say.
I mean, if you look at these, these boxes are cut up, right? So that's what Charlie's saying. If it was a rail box, then you can still increase more square footage.
That just looks like that would fit, but I get that part. So
For example, if you have an FAR of 3, but essentially what that means is you can put a box in that has 3 stories, because the FAR is 3 times, the floor area of the building can be 3 times the site area. So you could put a building in that covered the entire site and went up 3 floors. If your floor heights were 12 feet, say, that'd give you a 36-foot tall building, but the height limit is 100. Right? So the idea is that you shape the building so that you still have some open area left on the site after you've built your building.
Okay, so on the parking on both scenarios, would you say this is more or less than the city requires? They're
It's pretty close.
pretty close to what we're...
Pretty close.
Okay. And is the parking in B2, the parcel in B2, mostly for the people working in parcel A?
Excuse me, I just want to elaborate on the parking answer.
Okay.
This is a PUD. The PUD process allows the applicant to request modifications of the city's regulations in various things, including parking. So if they want to propose a different parking ratio than what the city requires as the part of the PUD process, they can do that.
Okay.
They haven't said they're going to do that for parking. They have said that they're going to do that for open space. And I'm not talking about the park area. I'm talking about the open, individual private open space that's required for each unit. They have indicated that they are going to modify that requirement, although they have not told us yet exactly how.
Well, just for our point of observing, what would we normally want in terms of parking spaces for a unit at this site, it kind of gives me some context of how I want to judge
Sure
it.
says we haven't done that analysis, I don't think, but
Okay.
But it's pretty close.
it's pretty
Yeah.
close.
And then the major parking building on parcel B2 is generally to house the people in parcel A.
Yeah,
So in the evening, that really won't be used that much.
it's unlikely.
Okay, for now, I'm done.
Can I follow up also with the parking question? So when you say pretty close, it's because if I remember correctly, the parking requirements in the planning regulations are sort of a target with a range above and below. So when you say pretty close, is
It falls within the range. I don't know where exactly in the range it is. I haven't done the analysis.
Okay.
But it is within, it's not, it's within somewhere in the range.
For residential, the range is from the estimated demand to 10% above that. For non-residential, it's from the estimated demand, it's from 33% below the estimated demand to 10% above it. So we don't go below the estimated demand for residential, but we do for other uses. And the residential is based on the unit mix. So studios and 1-bedrooms have a lower requirement than 2 and 3 bedrooms, and I don't believe we have the unit mix.
Okay.
Do we?
No.
So we don't know how many 1, 2, 3 bedroom studio units they're providing at this point, so we can't really calculate the exact parking requirement, right? Or parking, requirement right now.
They
Okay.
do have the breakdown on,
Do they?
Yeah, on the
They
plan.
have the
so-
breakdown here. Yeah, this
Oh,
is,
okay, well, I stand corrected then. I guess we could have
But I
done it.
did have one other question I didn't ask, and it was a clarifying question on the bonus points. Is my math wrong, or, because I counted they got 100 points?
did they?
Yeah, not 90. Is it not
Maybe
correct? You guys have 100 points already? That's what I thought.
got
Okay,
it.
thanks.
Sorry.
Well, they've got
I
all
think at the
parking
last minute I
figured
did the math wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I obviously didn't study this that closely. They've got the parking figured out, too. They've got it all summarized here. I can't verify that it's correct, but they've
Which
got
is,
it here.
that's the basis for me saying that it's pretty close, so.
So I have a couple more questions. What is the extent of So the council will be doing a study session on this in January. What is the extent of the approvals that would be required by the city council for this project?
They will be the final decision-making body.
No,
They-
but what approvals? I think?
For what? For
PUD
for the PUD?
Yeah.
Okay.
and general plan
And the
amendment.
general plan amendment, the same
Okay.
permits, the two
Okay.
permits, yeah.
Preliminary development plan and general plan amendments.
And then I had another question. Is there a certain rationale for the stepping down of the building towards Horton Street? It seems, I get that, I get along Sherwin why that's happening, but along Horton, it seems like it's just stepping down to sort of other.
That is what the applicant
Those
took away
uses.
from the input that was received by the community residents as well as the planning commission. I think the commission, there was one comment where they wanted to see smaller buildings, and only 7 to 9, this was supposed to be the tallest and no more than 7 to 9 stories. So I think they were sort of responding to that.
And the artist co-op is across the street.
Yeah,
And
they're
yeah.
proposing
Oh, that's the
they're
artist
proposing townhouses there. So they wanted it to sort of to step down and connect more with the artist lofts across the street.
And then I had one other question. I'm trying to remember.
They did?
What is meant by, so the hatched areas are, let me see if I can get to that drawing.
Yeah, the hatched area is a little confusing.
Yeah, so explain it.
First of all, the hatched area is also showing, I believe, how the height, first of all, to what extent the 55 feet will be. So if you measure it out, I haven't measured it out, but that's what it means. It also means that so there's the height, and the other is the use. So each building will have some different level of, it says here, it will be a ground floor. Essentially what it's saying is that the hatched areas, there will be no parking. You will not see parking here. It'll be either residential on the ground level on this parcel. The hatched area probably on this parcel is non-residential. Could be live work, it could be retail, it could be residential amenity. The hatched area here is residential. There's, I believe, if my memory is correct, there's no retail on this site. And this hatched area, I'm actually not quite sure what that is.
So I think what you're
So there are a
saying,
lot of clarifications that the applicant has been given a list of questions. that
I
they
believe
need to
the
clean
hatched
up.
areas represent residential or commercial uses on the ground floor,
Right.
as opposed to, as Mira said, parking or amenity space or utilities or whatever. The heights are just called out in text.
yeah.
Right.
They don't necessarily correspond to the hatched areas.
Except here and
Well,
here.
there are places,
I mean, so,
there are places, in most
But not
places,
here.
the lower heights do correspond to a hatched area, but that's not what the hatching is indicating.
So I think if I can kind of interpret what you're saying, I think even though that hatched area is kind of termed in terms of land uses in its description, it's really more of a comment about building form than it is about, because, commercial or residential doesn't really tell me much. You're saying it's sort of not parking,
not
it's more of a
parking.
comment
I
about
think
building
that's the
form.
easiest way, yeah.
Okay,
Well, I think if you look.
It's active frontage,
yeah.
is what it is.
Yeah, if you look at the, somewhere there's a site plan that shows the first floor of the buildings.
Yeah, that's paid.
And I apologize that these pages are not numbered. In your staff report, it refers to page numbers, but then the plans aren't numbered. Somewhere there's a site plan that shows
So
the
if you
ground floor
see-
uses, or there
This
was.
one, it would come
this?
after,
I didn't see that.
See anything?
Oh, man.
it would come after the street sections.
After the streets.
You go into the street sections, I'm sorry the pages are not numbered, but,
I don't think
I don't think we have that.
We don't have that one.
Not in our
We
side.
don't have
Yeah,
that.
oh,
the,
you don't have that?
No.
oh, no, we
Yeah,
don't.
the applicant, yeah,
Put it up.
Yeah, you can, if you want to put it up on the overhead.
No.
I think maybe it would make sense to have the applicant give this presentation.
Oh, there it is, yeah. Yeah, we apologize, I don't think this is in your packet, but this shows the ground level, and it's pretty obvious from this where the parking is, I think, and the parking ramps and so forth, and the boxes that aren't labeled, generally speaking, are either ground floor residential or ground floor commercial, although there are some boxes that I believe also represent either lobby or utility or amenity space.
Right, so on parcel B, here, they are saying that there would be restaurant, there would be retail, there could be live work, there could also be residential amenity space, so, you know, lobby for the residential. Along here, I'm not exactly, I suppose it's gotta be residential because there's nothing else that is being proposed. And so these spaces would also be residential and maybe some retail.
So,
Actually, I have it in here. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I mean, when I remember the original plan was sort of this corridor with retail on both sides of this circle. And if I look at this breakout on either plan, it doesn't seem like there's really any retail outside of the area right at Sherwin. Is that?
There is. I think these kind of questions maybe would be more appropriately directed to the applicant,
Okay.
so they can describe their proposal to you. Basically, the larger boxes on the ground floor are retail. Those, like in parcel B1, you see all those boxes that face Hubbard Circle? Those are too big to be residential units. That's all supposed to be retail. And I think on parcel C2, the ones at the kind of southeast corner of the building, I think those might also be retail. But the applicant can elaborate on that.
So before we allow the applicant to come up, are there any other questions of staff? All right, thanks, Maru.
Yeah, let me just.
Good evening, Chair Moss, members of the Commission. My name is Joe Ernst. I'm with SRM Ernst Partners, and I'm here tonight on behalf of me and my partners who are with me tonight, Bruce Dorfman with Thompson Dorfman, and Kevin Ma with Lennar Multifamily Communities, who has joined us since the last time we were in front of you. Just quickly, I want to share with you a little history. You know, our work on this plan started back in, back in 2003. At that time, we had developed a more flexible plan, which had a formula for looking at commercial and housing or variations thereof. The residential plan we had at that time was slightly more dense than what we were proposing. But the site configuration that we developed at that time went through the same process we've gone through here over the last year. It was vetted heavily with the Park Avenue District Committee, the community, and the study sessions. The image you see on the screen is the site as it was in 2003. In 2004, let's see. In 2004, we made an application to move this forward, and we started the EIR process. At that time, though, the remediation of the site was still undefined, and there was some dispute over the type of process to take. In 2005, we ended up withdrawing the application, and at that point in time, the remediation was transferred over from the Regional Water Board to the jurisdiction of the DTSC. But what's important to note, I think, is having gone through several study sessions at that point in time and worked with the community on that plan, that other than some of the heights we had at the northern end of the site, the plan density, the envelope, a lot of that was what would form the basis for the general plan for this site that was adopted in 2009 and amended since. And your questions about the swap with the open space at the north, that was something that was clearly contemplated at that time, resulting in the central green and discussed heavily through the Park Avenue District committees to make better use of that open space. Moving forward to 2012, Sherwin Williams completed remediation of the site under the jurisdiction of the DTSC. They moved off 140,000 tons of soil. And received closure on the soil from the DTSC. There is an operation and maintenance plan in place for groundwater management and remedial features that you've heard us discuss from time to time that we'll have to work around as we develop the site. But there are no use restrictions. And then more recently, as part of the discussions, the 1.468 acre parcel you see has become part of our plan as improving for park space. In 2013, we restarted the process once Sherwin did complete the remediation. We did reintroduce the same plan going back from 2004, but reintroduced it in a GP, compliant with the current general plan. Met with the community, had the 2 study sessions, one with you, the Planning Commission, and the City Council. And now we're back having incorporated most of that feedback we received in the plan. Before I turn it over to Boris Dramoff with Roma, our planner, I would like to tackle 2 issues. We're very surprised standing here tonight that there are issues about FAR and density. These are things that we've thought we worked out going back as far as a year in terms of the interpretation on how those calculated, and have those in meeting notes, and also more recently have it in an email confirming what we discussed a year ago. So again, we're standing here tonight surprised that our FAR and our density per acre is inconsistent. We do know we need the bonus for the height, and that's, I think, been consistent in the message we've shared with you. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Boris Dramoff and have him take you through the plan as it has been presented in our application. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Moss and Planning Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a long evening for all of us. And I would like to first introduce some of the other members of the team that have been working on this. Bonnie Fisher, landscape principal with Roma Design Group, has been involved in the project right from the beginning. LPAS, Ron Metzger and Brady Smith are here also. They're the architects who were working out some of the preliminary units that are been taken into account in the PDP that's being prepared. They will work as executive architects with a whole number of other architects that will ultimately design the different buildings on the site. I think there was a desire to have a lot of diversity and allow for some organic differences to occur, but at the same time create a cohesive way of implementing the projects. We also have BKF civil engineers. They're not here, but they've been addressing utilities, stormwater management, and grading related issues. I want to say also that this is a PDP. We are intending to file an FDP at a later date. The FDP will address the architectural character and development. It will also address in detail the landscape treatments on the site. So there is a future FDP. I think some of the questions that were being asked is we don't have the final design of the buildings. We have to work, and the developers are working to develop the kind of interest that may occur for the retail uses, and therefore we have to maintain a certain amount of flexibility, but the PDP is, and one of the questions you asked, and let me see if I can get to the picture. Nope, that's not the way to go. Okay. One of the questions you asked about the hatched area, maybe I could elaborate. I think it was answered really quite well, but still, is that we don't know exactly where everything will go, but we do think it's important to have active, people-oriented uses on the ground floors. Now, some of those may be live work, Some of them will be commercial, some of them may be office, and some of them may be amenities related to the development on the site. But the exact configuration and location is to be determined, but from as an urbanist and an urban designer, we wanted to make sure that there were specific designations where, yes, parking would not occur, but also that the uses at that point, along those frontages would create for a better public realm. So that is, I think, the intention, on that aspect. Miru did a very good job of presenting a lot of this, so I'm going to even shorten up quite a bit, my presentation. Our basic thing since the last time we were here, and we heard a great deal of very good comments, and we changed the project significantly since the last time. I think we definitely took to heart the issue of bringing in a portion of the city-owned park site into the project, and we feel very good about that. We think that it did not take away from some of the other ideas that were being promoted, but that is something that has to be worked out because of the complications, shall we say, with the State Department of Finance and so on. So therefore, we have to go ahead with 2 different projects. But we also heard from you about opening up the connection. Let's, if I can, opening up the connection back, this is really hard, right there. Opening up the connection to Horton Landing and really making a better spatial linkage through the site. We heard you a lot about the east-west connections and improving those as well. So I think we really tried to address a lot of those issues. And as I said, we have 2 2 projects, 2 options. You can see the different, oops, oh, this thing really jumps around, doesn't it? Sorry. You can see the difference between them. Just really, it's in that corner right there. And we, would like to get this issue resolved in a timely manner because we want to go ahead and proceed. And by the time, hopefully, we get to the FDP to you all, that will be resolved because it's hard to develop every specificity without having an issue like that taken into account. So let me go back and say a few other things related to the project. First of all, I think Miru said very well, the project, whether it's option A or B, has the same development program and really the same amount of open space. There's 2.08 acres of open space on the Sherwin Williams land that was called for in the general plan. The general plan did allow, though, for a swap of equal to create a better configuration, and there is 1.46 acres of publicly owned open space that will be integrated in the site or dealt with as a separate site, and it's still better connected than in some of the previous schemes that we showed to you. So there's 3.54 acres total of open space in both of the schemes. Our intention is to comply with the general plan and zoning in terms of intensity and density. I think there's a little bit of discussion that is still going on and maybe will continue about how it's calculated. And that's the difference. It's not a matter, we know the numbers overall, but it's a matter of how it's calculated and what is used for the basis of the calculation. But let us work that out with the staff and come back to you. But our intention is to comply, obviously, with that. But we feel that 540 dwelling units is within the allowable density, and 742,600 square feet is within the allowable FAR as of right, without needing a bonus. But we do need a bonus for the height restriction. Now let us work those details out because it is only a matter of how you calculate them. And I think there's some discussions that have taken place and these can be closed. So we're you know, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that right now, and I don't know that they do, but we'll get those worked out. In terms of parking, you asked, our initial approach, and certainly the distribution of unit types needs to be developed further as we get into the FDP. But taking a first cut at it, we have demonstrated meeting the existing city parking requirements for both visitor parking and by unit type on the project. So we're not asking for any deviation of that. We are also meeting the commercial parking, but in that case, we're saying we can go to, because there is some opportunity for deviation there between a range, as Mr. Bryant said, but we're asking for some allowance in that area because there's a great deal of parking here, and the ability to joint use parking when you can, visitor parking, for example, versus office parking, what time, you know, is there a percentage of sharing? And that'll be analyzed further, but we are asking for lowering the requirement on the commercial so that, you know, we can take advantage of that. But otherwise, our intention is to meet those opportunities. In terms of the open space development, and we showed, I don't know if these appeared in your packet. They did, okay. We think that there are opportunities for a wide range of recreational facilities. We did suggest a dog park in both schemes. We did suggest some sports courts in both schemes, and I can point to them. We did suggest a children's playground with an adult fitness. One of the things we found these days is that adults that take their kids to the playground like to get fit at the same time, or at least many of them do. So having some adult fitness associated with the children's playground tends to work very well. And we do think that the central Hubbard Circle, which is a kind of blending of movement and staying activities in the project, which create a very unique kind of place, you know, in this day and age is going to be a little bit more towards the hardscape than sitting on the lawn, considering the kinds of, you know, sustainability issues. But also, I think, as some people have said during the comments, maybe it should be more like a central plaza, you know, or at least portions of it, with rich landscaping, but at the same time, lots of opportunities for people to sit. In addition to that, we have open meadow areas for that more flexible play that also are part of the project. We did put some initial thoughts on potential street trees to be incorporated, but really the landscape palette is really going to be part of the FDP when we start developing the landscape design to a much greater degree. But we did want to indicate that there's a great deal of diversity that could be accommodated. Again, you know, Meru went through most of this. It is true, 75 feet is what is desired, stepping down to 55 feet along Sherwin and Horton, up to 100 feet in Parcel D at the north end. And these are similar in both options. We will be developing those to a much greater degree in the final development plan proposal. And I said, you know, I think our desire is to have all of the garages encapsulated within structures, particularly as it relates to the adjacent perimeter areas and along Hubbard Circle. We have described some initial architectural guidelines and standards in the PDP for both the buildings and the landscape spaces, if you read the complete text of that. However, that is what we're going to be bringing back when we bring the final development plan for both of those aspects, architecture and for the landscape. stormwater management features are incorporated in all of the schemes. It's important to note here that we do have to address some unique constraints that we have on the site. Number one is the site is built up to the old dock level. This is part of the remediation. We transitioned very nicely, very, very smoothly up to that level, but we can't dig that level out and put parking below grade. So all parking has to be above grade and therefore has to be carefully encapsulated. And as I mentioned, it also is part of the reason we need to address the heights that we have and that we're asking for. Secondarily, in terms of stormwater management, we can't percolate back into the ground. So we have to have a system that collects, and in the full PDP, there are some examples that we've already put on that, but we have to carefully design those areas so that it gathers the water, collects it, and then it takes it to the storm drain after filtering it appropriately. Secondarily, we want to have good planting for the trees, but we don't want to have the infiltration between the stormwater and the trees because some trees like more water, some like less. And therefore, those have to be handled also very carefully, and they have to be under-drained back to the storm drainage system as well in order to allow for the appropriate growth to take place. So there's a certain amount of percolation that can be handled with some of the grassier or landscaped areas, and that's taken into account. But all of those very details that have to be worked out will be presented when we come up with the final development plan for all of the public spaces and the areas on the site. So let me move on for a minute. The pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular circulation, I think Maru covered maybe more the vehicular, but let me just point out they're similar on both sides. I think we want two major links for the pedestrian connections from Horton Landing and the Emeryville Greenway through Hubbard Circle to Hubbard Street. We want to also have a connection to Halleck Street as well, so they're along the railroad tracks. And of course, there are the east-west connections and the other smaller connections, but those are the principal ones. And similarly, on the other option, the same principal connections are also desired. Bicycle follows also the same principle of having these dual connections, one through the center of the site and one along the railroad tracks, and similarly on both options. In terms of vehicular, the one thing I would say is that the entrance to the garage under option A is the end of Halleck Street. That is right at the terminus, and you come into the site that way. We do want to have fire department access on the, or the fire department would like fire department access on the trail adjacent to the rail tracks, so we have to accommodate both. But the intention is that the entrance to parcel C1 is off of Halleck Street, and there is one entrance off of Sherwin, which is shown on, into parcel B1. Otherwise, all of the garage entrances are within the project area. The Hubbard Circle is a one-way loop. 46th, or the new 46th Street, that's what we're calling it, is two-way through the center and provides, in both cases, access to C2. Because of the difference in this scheme, parcel C1 is accessed vehicularly separately. In this scheme, we have to access C1 through that connection where there is a pedestrian link through the site, only on the ground floor and up above. But it's only a parking connection link. It's not a heavily traveled one. But there is no other way to do it because there has been, it's not desired to put a driveway, directly into C1 in this configuration. So those are some of the aspects of what our proposals cover, and we're here to hear your comments and to answer any questions you may have. There is a full PDP that has been submitted to the planning staff and has a lot of the standards and details. There was a mention, we do think that one of the things we are asking for is not to do the traditional requirements, or I should say the basic requirements for on-site open space, that is balconies on units, because we think that the kind of architecture that has been desired in this area would not be appropriate if every unit had a balcony on it. And therefore, we think that balconies may be desirable to some degree, but they ought to be more selectively placed rather than ubiquitously placed over a project of this scale and magnitude, which is different. So the architectural expression would be a lot better in terms of that kind of industrial, cutting edge look that you all seem to be very good at developing in your community, if we had that requirement placed over it. So we're suggesting that that be reconsidered, but you can take a look at it when we get further into the final development plan as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Could you pull back up the
Sure.
site plan, one of the site plans? Maybe one of the ones where you have the hatches. Just
Yes.
Can you point out where the intended retail is on this site?
Okay. Generally, by the way, in almost all cases, our first priority for retail has been in this area. And by the way, this goes back to earlier proposals as well. We have, we think that at this point in time, there may be some key locations. Again, as I said, a lot of it has to do with more detailed outreach to potential tenants, because there's nothing worse, I just from my own experience, it's nothing worse than putting retail space and ending up with empty retail space, I'll tell you. So we have to be very careful about that. But right at the moment, we do see this corner right in here as having a great deal of potential, possibly for a restaurant. If it's the open space with this scheme, maybe there's a great potential even in this corner as well. Certainly along this frontage was our first choice for those kinds of uses. Along Horton Street, we didn't see this as a retail frontage. We did see this as a possible office frontage. And on the opposite side, we did see these as potential live-work types of units with ground floor accessibility, and therefore with a great deal more activity. But at this point in time, we, as I said earlier, our main aspect is to try to create uses and activities that will contribute to the creation of the public realm and to the activities even in the Muse area here between Parcel A and Parcel B1 as well. So,
In that Muse area, is that intended to be gated? Is that private?
The Muse area is intended to be accessible during certain times of the day, but not at all times. In other words, it can be closed off in the evenings. It's really intended to be during those periods of time when it's closed, it would be accessed by the residents. There would be residential on the ground of B1, and there certainly is office in Parcel A as well.
I have just a couple questions. Since we're on this slide, I'll go with the parking thing. I understand, well, if you can go back to the parking circulation, either plan, would be fine. Because I'm still fixating on Halleck Street, and the reason being is I see a lot of traffic coming off of Horton Street, and especially with that diverter getting into Horton Street.
Good point.
is going to be kind of difficult. You're loading a lot of cars into the area that we want to be kind of where people hang out at this Central Green and this park and et cetera. And to me, it just seems totally natural that you would extend Halleck Street, especially if you're going to make it accessible to fire trucks. It would definitely handle a car. And in this iteration or in Plan B, you could enter both parcels, C1 and 2, from the backside. So you take all those cars that were now entering the site to get to those parcels, either from Horton Street, Hubbard, or Sherwin Street, now would all come in off of Halleck Street. Or not all of them, but I mean, we're going to talk about a lot of people who's coming off the freeway and stuff. So I understand the idea that we want a bike path, but we share roads all the time. And to me, the reason we're doing the diverter on Horton is to keep that as a bicycle boulevard. So I think, and then if you go back to the other, like, option B, you have more cars pulling into that project now because now all these people in parcel C1 have to pull in here. So and even if you had them come all the way in on Halleck Street to the back end, say the north end of parcel C, they can enter and then use the bridge to go into parcel C1. So I just don't see why we're not making better advantage of a lower volume street to take some volume off of Horton. And I think the traffic study is going to give us more information on if this is something we really need to do. But that's something I'd really like to push for. And then the other question I have is, do you feel that in your specified, in your plan, that you can eventually meet the design guidelines of the city? In the staff report, it said there were areas that you guys were not meeting the allowable or needed square footage for planting areas by the curb, the sidewalk, and the planting areas by the building. So I just want to know this.
Okay, let me take the first one first. The one thing I forgot to mention that I was going to is we did put in the traffic diverter, but that is not this project's project. We put it in because people said it might be there, but it could be elsewhere. I think we certainly would support the bicycle orientation of Horton Street. So I don't know, to what degree the community will settle on how to do that aspect of it. There is, we're in a little bit of a dilemma because, we would have to use the city parcel for access if we did what you say. And we're in a dilemma because not only do we know if the trade can occur in a reasonable time frame, we don't know if the city parcel can be used for some other purpose like you're mentioning, but that could be looked into. But, and the only other thing that, we'd have to recognize a constraint in terms of sort of the grades and the slurry wall that is at the edge of the property line and how that could be handled between the two, but that could be investigated. So I think that's an idea that maybe, we'll take a look at, but I think might best be handled during the environmental process and we look at the traffic counts and all of that during that time. But it's an interesting idea and we'll keep it in mind.
I'd appreciate that if it was looked at in those reports.
Okay.
And then the sidewalks and the street plans.
I think it's only a question of the, we have, I believe, we have the same sidewalk width that's called for in the guidelines. The question is that we think we need more than 4 feet for the street trees.
Well, just reading on page 9 of the staff report.
We put 6 feet in the street trees and a little less in the pedestrian areas because we thought that was a better balance. But we can do it either way, but a PDP does allow you to vary. But the overall width of the sidewalks is the same as in the guidelines. It's just how we distribute it. And if we'll discuss it with staff in greater detail, and if that's an issue, it can be responded to fairly
I think generally it was in compliance. There were a few places where it didn't appear to be. I believe along existing Sherwin Avenue, perhaps, and perhaps along existing Horton Street. The cross sections within the project itself are certainly in compliance. Pretty close.
And maybe, thank you very much, Charlie. We have dilemma on Sherwin because the sidewalks aren't wide enough. But we are setting back 5 feet on Sherwin, and therefore we will get additional space.
Well, as Boris says, we do need to discuss this further with the applicant, but concerning Horton Street and Sherwin also, we would expect that the sidewalks will be rebuilt, that we won't just be reusing the existing sidewalks, which means we could also relocate the curb if we needed to.
Oh, well, we do have to talk about it. I think parcel A is built to the edge of the property line, and, that's, so if we're, yes, we need to talk.
Just as long as you guys work, because I'm just reading when the staff report on page 9 suggests that you currently don't meet it in all the areas. So if it's something that can be worked out, because we've done in the Park Avenue District already on Park Street itself with the great sidewalks, it makes a difference.
Oh, sure. No,
Commissioner
love
Keller,
sidewalks.
this is a study session, and we'll work this out. We are very aware, staff is aware that we do have design guidelines, especially regarding sidewalk widths. So let me assure you that staff and the applicant team will be having a lot of conversations on this.
We concur.
Are there any other questions for the applicant?
I have one more. I remember it was sort of a part of the last time this came before us. The elevation on Hubbard is shown at 11.7, and that at Hubbard Circle at 16. So what's the accessible path from Hubbard Street to Hubbard Circle?
We would be from Hubbard Street to Hubbard Circle will meet accessibility requirements that will keep it under a 1 in 20 slope. So it's not a 1 in 12, it's a 1 in 20. So approximately 4.5–5%, less than becoming a ramp.
So for the 4-foot
Yes.
elevation change from, okay.
You probably don't have the detailed grading plan yet.
Yeah, no,
No, we've worked it out, so it does work.
Just
And by the
alongside.
way, on the 46th Street, it's like 2% or 1%, and it's very, very shallow. But we do have some grades, and we are cognizant of that, and we would want to be able to meet it appropriately.
Other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, we will go ahead and open the public comment. So if anyone would like to speak on this item, please come forward. If there are a lot of people, if you could kind of form a line, and then if everyone could make sure they adjust the mic so they're speaking right into it, and then please sign in after you're done speaking.
Hi, I'm Donna Briskin at 1500 Park, and earlier this week I sent you an email from our ad hoc committee about our concerns and support of this project. It was also signed by our full board of directors and 16 other residents in our building. Our building's had a tradition of not being involved in the community, and what we're seeing is that the interest in this project and other things going on in the community is just escalating. So we're very pleased with the involvement. I also want to say we want this project to go forward, done right. We think it'll enhance the neighborhood by adding energy and life. Our district's ambience is precious, and we need to work together to protect this unique historic and artistic nature of the Park Avenue. We also want to thank all of you, the city staff, the developers, and the Planning Commission for going ahead with 2 plans. Clearly, A is the better, in our opinion, and we understand the complexity of the land swap, and I don't know, to me it's pretty extraordinary that we're going to pursue both, and I hope that we'll get resolved quickly, and we're encouraging the city, as is everybody, to resolve that. Option A, the reason it's so much better for us, the 2 primary ones are obviously that doesn't put a building right outside our building. But also I think it makes the park a better public park space than that sort of dead area back by the railroad tracks. Option B also, as Commissioner Keller pointed out, does not have the access to a garage from Halleck. And again, we think that this being such a landlocked parcel, it's really important to spread this traffic as much as we can. There's obviously a built-in conflict, compression between the car demand and the bike boulevard, and so we're also looking forward to a complete traffic study as part of this project. on that conflict with the Bike Boulevard, or, you know, the increased demand, we'd like to encourage that the bike pathing through the development be really good, so that we're not only trying to keep cars off Horton, but we're trying to move some of the bike traffic, even if it's just the recreational bikers, onto the property. We're glad that there's going to be significant parking, and that the access to that parking is coming out of 46th and then dispersing, hopefully mostly north onto Horton. And we are disappointed, quite frankly. We know it's within their rights, but we would have liked to have seen the frontage on Sherwin and Horton be even lower, so that it didn't exceed the height of the existing parcel A on their part, or that front of our building, which is 42 feet, I think, on our side. So we understand it's within the guidelines, but we would have liked to have seen that lower. Anyway, thank you very much for reading our submission and for considering our input.
Thank you.
Let me just change this so at least you're looking.
Yep, Boris, can you put the keyboard down so that people won't accidentally hit it?
Oh,
Keyboard, just put it off to the side so people don't hit it by mistake. And the mouse?
it's a mouse. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
My name is John Wolf. I'm a resident of 1500 Park Avenue and on the committee that is watching the unfolding of the Sherwin Williams project. We appreciate that the developer has spent time listening to the neighborhood. We much prefer option A. It would dampen traffic flow. It has 50 more parking spaces than option B, and for open spaces it is much more pleasing. However, the land ownership issues may prevent the implementation of option A. This leaves option B, some good points and bad. First, density and traffic. 540 units is quite a lot for a parcel locked on two sides. Traffic flow is in direct proportion to site density. It is worrisome. There's only two main exits for the development, Hubbard and Horton. The Planning Commission has already heard complaints about using the small street of Hubbard as the grand entrance to what the developer refers to as the Hubbard Circle. In option B, all new buildings, most new buildings, funnel their traffic primarily onto this circle and exit Hubbard. This is too many cars for Hubbard. Horton, the other main exit for the site, is the city's premier bike boulevard. But Horton, the vehicle thoroughfare rivaling Hollis, is already accommodating a daily car count of 3,000. And Horton has already provoked a neighborhood squabble over traffic and bike incompatibility, over diverting and blocking traffic. This is all before the development and its cars are added to the mix. It is a perplexing problem. And at this point, the developer and the city point to the traffic study as the next step for finding solutions. I hope for some innovative ideas. A good point, the bike path. The developer has stated he will create a bike path through the full north-south length of the development. We are in favor of this idea. This would give bicyclists on Horton a choice. I realize commute bicyclists prefer roads, but the pleasure bicyclists might opt for a safer and more scenic route. And lastly, the height issue. A cluster of 75-foot buildings, even with step-downs, is too much for this neighborhood. Currently, Sherwin Street and Horton are anchored by buildings that are 42 feet tall. This is the edge of the Park Avenue district. The existing Sherwin Williams building, Parcel A, is a good example of an old industrial building that has a good feel to it. It is 42 feet tall. It should be the cornerstone of this project, not surrounded and overshadowed by new buildings that rise to near twice its height. Raise buildings C2 and D to higher heights if need be, but keep the new buildings at the southern edge of the site compatible with the existing neighborhood. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Kim Steinbacher, resident and board member at 1500 Park. And I'd like to thank Donna and John for eloquently stating a lot of the issues that we've discussed at 1500 Park. And I think our letter that we turned in earlier captured a lot of what we have been interested in and what we're looking for in the project. I'm actually here tonight to read a statement on behalf of one of our small business owners who was unable to attend this evening. So this is from Krishna Hanks, and she owns East Bay Pilates at 1500 Park, and she's a current member of the Economic Development Committee and Committee on Aging. She says, as a small business owner since 2005 in Emeryville, I continue to advocate for projects that help maintain, grow, and encourage small business development in Emeryville. We have a vibrant, artistic, and eclectic community where locally owned and operated businesses can thrive if given the chance. We have for years had an empty lot that is a blight on our district. Our business sees the Sherwin Williams project, and particularly Option A, as a chance for positive change similar to the achievements on Park Avenue. If as a city we truly support small business, this is a chance to back that up with action. And I will say that I also agree with her statement on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sharon Wilshire, and I live at 1420 45th Street, which is one of the buildings of the 45th Street Artists Cooperative. And I think that maybe we're all putting a lot into the possibilities of the traffic study, myself included, just in terms of how some of the issues that are in this area now, especially with Horton being a bike boulevard, things that in terms of looking just a little bit beyond this postage stamp, looking a little beyond to see how traffic could flow through this area. There are actually 5 residential properties that are right on the immediate interface, either on Horton or Sherwin, to this property. Some of them with driveways that dump right out onto the street there. So, one of our buildings, for example, the new 46th Street is almost right across from our driveway, and it's already an issue just getting out onto the street. So, and I did think about something, and I love all the ideas about a trolley, but I was just thinking maybe on the railroad spur, a trolley would help to solve some of our problems to have. I think that it seems that most of the pedestrian flow is really north-south, not so much east and west. I don't really know how much, at least off of Horton, how much that's really been improved. So those are just a few comments, and we thank the developers for the time that they've spent with community meetings, and we look forward to more of them. Thank you. Thank you.
My name is John Bowders. I'm a resident of the Park Avenue District as well, over here in the Bessler Lofts building. I would like to begin by thanking the developers for listening to the community in respect to the traffic study we're going to have in the green space. I provided some comments in advance just to summarize what I wanted to discuss briefly tonight, which is an item that's been on your minds and on the minds of the City Council when it reviewed this previously, but was not mentioned this evening. That's the affordability of the housing that will go into this proposal. I am the Director of Policy at Housing California, and we are the state's leading nonprofit in advocacy for affordable housing development. The opportunity to make sure that this project includes affordable housing is now. The developers should be encouraged to access and contact affordable housing developers. There are at least a dozen in the East Bay who would partner with them to make sure that some portion of this project includes affordable housing for low-income and fixed-income renters. If we give up the entitlements that the developers are seeking now, we legally lose the ability under existing law to require that later. In lieu fees, which most developers have pursued here in Emeryville, are ineffective to developing affordable housing. In lieu fees require us to put that money aside. It takes years for us to build up a sufficient fund to do an affordable housing development, and we lose keeping up with what our current need is. I provided attached to my comments, ABAG came out with its RENA for 2014 to 2022. And this is an opportunity for us to put a dent in what our regional housing needs allocation is going to be. Again, I wanted to just point out a couple things. There's a lot of money that came online, projects I personally worked on this year related to affordable housing. Prop 41 passed in June. That's $600 million of general bond money that can be used to house formerly homeless veterans. That's money affordable housing developers will have access to if they're in partnership with a private developer. $100 million in general funds was dedicated to the MHP and the MSHP programs. Again, that's for affordable housing development for families. And finally, we're currently in the process of putting regulations together on the implementation of cap and trade dollars. And one of the biggest things that's being overlooked here is that there's going to be a ton of money available annually to do transit-oriented development for projects that are within a certain radius of a transit hub. And the transit center and the Amtrak station are both situses that would make this project available for that money. And so I would encourage you to ask the developer to partner with an affordable housing developer to make sure that a portion of these units gets developed at an affordable level for families and seniors. Beyond that, I'll save my comments on traffic. I don't probably have any time left, 10 seconds. I'll save my comments on traffic for another hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tito Young, and I live at 5855 Horton Street, just down the block from here. And I want to thank everybody for a very exciting project. I think it's kind of wonderful. Option A to me is, in fact, the most wonderful because it does have an opening for the space, and I'm really all about spaces and how they work. And I just see that option B just kind of feels like it, kind of a park back there that, you know, kind of gets lost and kind of blocks everybody off. But I also want to make a comment about the fact of the architectural feel of the buildings themselves, where there was a discussion regarding the balconies versus non-balconies and making sure that there's a series of patterns. And I want to be a real stickler about that because it's the patterns and the shapes that actually can do things to the FAR as much as possible. They do make balconies, and sizing does change volume. So in some cases, it might make a building appear, you know, physically smaller. At the same time, I think it'd be really good that as they're designing the buildings, focal points are really established from various places, and one of them would be that park in the center, and the other one would be in the over by what would be to the south side of the property. Also, there's one place that I think would be more interesting to think about is the cutoff area where right at the middle of the lot it kind of comes up and then drops over. Not really much you can do with it. Where the north side of the site happens, well, right there is a parking lot, and it's just a great parking lot. So if it's possible, talk to the owners of that lot about something that could in fact be part of this project rather than just be an alien line that happens between one side or the other. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Phyllis Larimore. I live at 1500 Park, and two things I wanted to ask about. The first is that someone recently told me that there were meetings with Sherwin Williams maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and at those meetings, it was stated by people from Sherwin Williams that there would not be condos in this, you know, the upcoming development that they were planning and or envisioning. And the reason for that was that the toxic land underneath, selling properties in the development would represent too much of a liability for Sherwin Williams. So they were ruling out at that point any condo development. And one of my biggest concerns about this entire development is that it's all rental, but no one has said this piece that I just heard about the other day. So it was suggested by the development team at some point that they were going to map the project for condos, but that it was going to be all rental unless, you know, the market changed. So I haven't heard any discussion of that in this session, and So I wonder what the reality, what the truth is. Is there this sort of ruling out by the owner of the property, Sherwin Williams, of selling, and that's the reason that there are no condos in this entire development versus rental property? And if not, is there still any potential that some of this could be sold, some of these units could be sold as opposed to being entirely rental? So that's my first concern. And my second concern is of course, the traffic. I do not like the idea of having anything more on Halleck Street or Hubbard Street, but somehow, even though I live on Hubbard Street, it's virtually going to be impossible to have much more happening on Hubbard Street because it's so busy all day. In the evening it's not, but so that's, but Halleck, I'd like to preserve that bit of peace that we have around our building. So please don't put anything on Halleck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott Donahue, 1420 45th Street at the Artist Co-op. I'm also on the BPAC, and we looked at this as an improvement from the first iteration, and we, of course, liked A as a preference. We think that having that centralized park is really good. One of the things we really talked about was having sufficient protected bicycle parking at ground level so that a site that's going to be as dense with traffic as this would offer the option of walking and cycling for the residents to get out of the site during rush hour. It's going to be so dense, but if you need to go get some supplies, get your dinner, we've just somehow got to make another option. And that option realistically is walking or bicycling. So bicycle storage is important to have enough and have it be truly accessible and protected and really work, because that's the kind of lifestyle that is going to be found to be effective in a site like this, and perhaps have an element of beauty to it, a new urban life where people get out of their cars and really do have a public life on the street with their neighbors. And I like that they are really talking about having much more of the project at ground level that offers interaction with neighbors and with users of the site to experience it as a neighborhood and as a public park. And this site really does emphasize the need for the bridge across the railroad tracks. I think that's going to be hard for us to not have it and have this site really work. And I think that's something we have to pay attention to as a city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Craig Hong. I'm at 1500 Park Avenue. I think option A is the way to go. It's the open spaces, they all are interconnected. And I can see standing in Hubbard Circle, the sight lines would be far more pleasing. Also, it is self-serving that I am at 1500, but also I think the residents of the new development would also prefer and be attracted more to Plan A because of the open sites. And also, the way the two parcels at the top are configured, it's like the World Trade Centers. It also like negates the draft that comes from two buildings abutting each other, juxtaposed that way. And also, it's just a dispersal of the developed units that create a more open and a more eccentric and less regimented configuration, like the box 4 grid configuration like Plan B. It's, that is by far the inferior design. So I hope everyone understands that option A is really preferable if anyone would had the choice. And I hope they can swap out the zoning constraint for the northern proposed option B park, which is isolated. And would also like obstruct people who have like various activities in the open spaces. It would isolate them from their kids or their friends, depending on what kind of activities they're engaged in. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? All right, well, thank you everyone for your comments. We'll go ahead and close the public comment period, and we'll bring this back to the commission for discussion. Commissioner Keller, do you want to get us started?
Do you really want to start with me?
Go for it.
Okay, y'all need to go to the bathroom or anything? I'll try to make this as quick and succinct as possible. First of all, I want to thank for the improved project. I think you guys have made strides, leaps and bounds in making a better project. I don't think it has to be said, but I'm going to reiterate it. Everyone wants option A. So I think the city staff needs to really work on that and make sure that this could happen. I'm really happy with the increased square footage of the commercial and flex space. I understand that you prefer to have as much retail space rented out when you're doing it, but you're not building a shopping center. And I think if you don't build commercial or retail space, we'll never get those amenities. So if it has to sit empty a while, there are tax advantages for that. And I think we really need to do more with that. I like the fact that you're doing some live work, but if you go along Powell Street or along the Greenway, those places aren't used. Their windows are shut, their blinds are shut. I never see anyone go out those doors. So I like live work, I like a little bit, but I'd like to see more space that's going to activate it. I like the broken up buildings, making it a fine grain and walkable neighborhood. And I like the use of reclaimed water where we can use it. I think that's important for us to do anywhere. The one major dislike I don't like is I don't like the Emeryville making the loop in the whole way. Riding that out to Watergate when it makes that loop out by the towers and stuff, it's very clumsy, it's very awkward. I'd rather see it come down, if we do even do the diverter, if it comes down Horton Street, turns onto 46, comes in the middle of Hubbard Circle, and then exits that way, it would be better than making a loop. And I think it would be just really disruptive, especially towards that north end park, to have the Emmett go around there. We have 8 findings that we're supposed to have, so I'm going to kind of briefly go through those. I feel the siting of the parcels in the building is acceptable. And it goes without saying that we all want option 1 for parcel C or option A for parcel C1. I think this, for the street circulation, we need to wait for the complete traffic report or study. But I still am at a loss why we're not looking at Halleck Street, and I'd really like to have that examined very closely. I'm happy with the open spaces, especially in option 1. The uses of open spaces, from my viewpoint, are as follows. I think the central green should be a more social and passive area. I think the open space to the north should be where we do our active recreation. I'd like to see it incorporated with the south end of Horton Landing Park. It could include, the court says it's shown and the play equipment there. The open space along Sherman, whether that's in option A or B, I think should include the dog park. And generally, I think that should be free and open space. Something for room for events, but free of equipment and restrictives of the use, but maybe just simple open space. I feel the height as shown is good. I think it's what it needs to be. The mix of uses is much improved. I like the amount that we discussed. I believe the proposed categories for bonuses are acceptable, and I think we can come up with quite a few more, as I'll illustrate further on. I have several ideas to make for conditions, and they'll be as follows. For the conditions of approval, which I think some of these will create some more options for bonus opportunities for you, is number 1 that hasn't been discussed openly, but I think what I'd like to see, and I'd like to make this as a condition, is on the north side of the the pedestrian bridge coming from Bay Street has a nice sloping ramp to where we're not going to require an elevator on that bridge. I'd like to see that ramp mirrored on the south side so that people coming off that bridge and going to the south side of town don't have to go clear up north to the end of Horton Landing Park and circle back around. But I'd like to see a split of those ramps coming down into that park. So I feel that the affordable housing component is a must. I think with the new project we have coming online and the new building that we've just completed, we've done enough with isolating the people of lower income, and I think I'd like to see them integrated into the community as much as possible. I'd much prefer that than an in lieu fee. How that works out, I think, can come later on in the FDP, but I think affordable units are key, and I think I'm going to feel that's going to need to be a condition of approval. As Mr. Donahue had expressed, I think we need to do bike lockers in all parking garages. Ground floor would be great, scatter them throughout, but I'd even like to see an honest attempt to install bike lockers, which is open to the public in the parcels. Install car share pods within the project in the garages and on the streets. Identify the proper space for bike share. I really want to stress this for if we do this, it'll show Bike Share Bay Area that we are serious about having them come to Emeryville by committing to a location even before they've committed to us. I think we need, as I'm going to suggest in every project we get, that we provide AC Transit easy passes for the residents and the employees, and provide electronic transit info signs wherever possible. Some of the suggestions I have for bonus points is to pay an in lieu fee perhaps for the Cultural Arts Center, because I understand that's part of the Park Avenue District Plan, but I know we can't do that just yet, but I think maybe a part of an in lieu fee to support that. In looking at some of the Transform Green Trips initiative, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Transform and their Green Trip initiative, but I think you should acquire, if you can't acquire a total certification, I think you should at least contact them as a starting point and see what can be done. That would also help our traffic situation. I agree with the staff report that maybe you could contribute to the Phase 2 of Horton Landing Park as suggested by the DCC. And I'd kind of be interested to find out if we have a value on the land and what the remediation would cost, but I don't know that we need to spend that time tonight doing that. And again, using the reclaimed water. And then finally, the residents of Park Avenue took a lot of time and effort in writing some of their concerns to us, so I would like to address a few of those comments that they made. And first, I'd like to address the comment on parking. And there's a common phase that's pretty much accepted as fact anymore, and that is if you plan for cars, you get more cars. My experience living in a building with a 5-story parking structure is that there isn't enough, there's not enough space in the garage, but people are lazy and want to park close to the building or the front door, as close as possible. So as much as they do this so much so as to violate no parking signs at private property. I think the solution is not overparking in neighborhoods so much as it is managing the on-street parking itself. Overbuilding parking is costly both in money to the developer and future residents, and it also costs our environment. I believe the developer can work with Transform in their Green Trip program that we could reduce the amount of parking and even improve the neighborhood parking. Secondly, I agree with the newly installed diverter on Horton Street, and if we do that, it should not direct traffic into the neighborhood. I really like the diverter, but this is a pending problem. In my short time looking at the problem, I see it as a difficult one to solve. The one idea I did come up with is to put a very obvious sign at 40th Street and Horton that states closed to through traffic. Then at Park Avenue, which is the last place they could turn before actually getting into the neighborhood, but by Park Avenue and Horton, I think again we should place a very obvious sign that says through traffic must turn right. Now, I realize this is not going to stop someone from proceeding forward in the neighborhood, but it would definitely direct people in the proper way to go. In conjunction with this subject, there was a suggestion of rerouting the bike lane from Horton to the Greenway extension to Halleck and then Beat Street. This rerouting I do not support. As a very confident and sometimes aggressive biker to a fault, Beat Street is where I actually broke my collarbone and 2 bones in my thumb last year. This street is a terrible condition, and I don't see Oakland fixing it any time in the next decade. So I think we need to leave Horton Avenue as our bicycle boulevard, and it doesn't preclude people from using the new pathway as a pleasure path or whatever, but I don't want to see the designation changed. And that side of the freeway over there at Beach and Wood Street is really just very unpleasant altogether. Thirdly, and I think it's too early in the process to get into the architectural details, but I feel that at our last study session, the city and all of us made it abundantly clear we want finishes and styles that fit the neighborhood, and we do not want any tri-colored or multicolored stucco boxes. But since we're working with a new partner, Lanier, I think it's a good time to make that issue generally known that we want quality construction, quality architecture, and quality features. And lastly, I'd like to try and alleviate some of the fears generated by the unknown. The neighborhood I live in at Pacific Park Plaza, known as the North Bayfront, has very similar road and traffic constraints as the Park Avenue District. And taking into consideration only the buildings that are currently occupied in my neighborhood, not planned to be built, there are over 1,500 residential units in that neighborhood between Powell Street and 65th Street. I would say it is at least twice the density of the Park Avenue District with this proposed build-out. And I do not experience any real traffic impacts, and my area also includes the public market. So let's not let fear of the subpar project, don't let the fear create a subpar project and thus a subpar neighborhood. Let's let the traffic report tell us what we need to know. And for now, that's it.
That was a lot.
I warned you.
So, yes, of course, Plan A is the preferred, but we do understand that, and I think it's great that we are going forward with both, just in case. And I am concerned with the traffic, and so we are going to need to see what the traffic report says. In terms of, yeah, I know we're not talking about a diverter versus a speed reduction, but that might be an option as opposed to actually diverting traffic. But I actually don't really understand how the traffic study is going to be carried out, and is it with the diverter or is it with?
With both. It's
It'll
going
be
to
both.
analyze with both.
Like they're
with
going to run
diverters
one and then they'll run another.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of the circulation and layout, I agree with the Emery go-around not making the loop. That seems crazy. And I also very much like the idea of having a ramp come down from the proposed and hopefully soon to be built someday bridge across to Bay Street. If we're going to make this little commercial area viable, it's kind of, could think of it as like the anti-Bay Street, right? So this is a way to get people across and south, and it seems like it could easily, the sports court could be separated or something, but I think that's very important. I think the use mix is acceptable. I would prefer to keep the density at what the city is requiring. I think that it's dense enough. And I thought that was a very good point about the building height. Maybe, I'm not sure who made that in the public comments, but I thought the site, the C2 could be made higher, and I don't know about parcel D if that's possible to be made higher, but and again, I'm not sure if that would require a general plan amendment, but it would be nice to have the frontage on Horton Street reflect the lower height, and maybe step back, or even just stepping back a little bit more aggressively in terms of open space, sky space. So I'm not sure how that's all working out with the volumes and densities that you're dealing with. I think the DCC, the BPAC, and the Park and Rec recommendations were all good, and the live workspaces in the mix work. Although I have noticed that indeed it is hard to see anyone doing anything in them ever. They just look like kind of vacant storefronts. Truck loading bays need to be designed all to be on site, so that's an important circulation related issue. And I also agree that materials need to be of very high quality. We have this industrial realm here that we're working with is the brick, concrete, steel, and we're really tired of seeing stucco, so that's, or hardy board. And definitely no dead walls. This is a site that will be seen, we're not sure about that parking lot, but I think it's time that the city stops thinking in terms of dead walls and everything needs to be activated. I think the circle, the Hubbard Circle,
In that, I'll just add that, yeah, I would echo the comments that have been given about including affordable housing in the project. I think that's a, sort of a goal that we all share and is, something that would be really important here. Also, I, just want to say for the record, as I think I've said before, I really wish that the city council would give us some sort of mechanism to require some degree of ownership housing. So we don't currently have that in the form of any sort of policy, and it's only going to get more and more important as we go forward, unless there's significant economic changes on the horizon, which I'm not seeing at this time.
Well, I think they could probably get away with it if they remove the affordable housing requirement from condominiums. Then you might get condominiums, but they're so imbalanced now that nobody would want to build.
Well, and I also think it's the market right now, and it's also the 10-year responsibility of them being responsible for the construction of it for 10 years. I think that's a heavy indicator that they don't want to get into that trap.
On another comment of yours, as far as the idea of moving parcel C2 to the south, I do feel like something gets lost there in this whole idea of the buildings opposite each other on the Hubbard Circle. I actually wonder if there's a way to, I know option B sort of creates a sort of a bottleneck at the Hubbard Street connection to Hubbard Circle, and that's sort of, there's an appeal to that in a way, and then you kind of go through there and then it opens back up to this circle. But maybe the alternative, if we're moving C1 to the west, would, instead of a bottleneck, just sort of create a funnel into it instead, with a little bit of park on the near parcel B1 as well, or something along those lines. I'm not sure, but I do feel like moving parcel C2 to the south kind of gets rid of this whole north-south axis. And I also think that, I think parks that are of a decent size and interspersed around, like between residential and retail spaces, are more alive than large expanses of park. I think that large expanses of park can be a little bit overrated, and I think if we ended up bunching a bunch of the buildings to the south and then having this big expansive park, the park might get less utilization, and I think we'd create some darker alleys and stuff between buildings like C2 and C1. I don't know.
And if I could, I just have one more comment to make, and this is more going into the future. And they talked about the private outdoor space and that they're not really looking to match that or meet our requirements. And the one thing I'd just like to say about not having outdoor space is, looking down at the apartments that I look down on, I see a lot of outdoor space that's underutilized, although I like it and I think it should be part. In this project, I think it could work in our favor by not providing outdoor space that's private to get the people out in the community. We have all this great park space that we're putting in this project, and I think if people lack it in their own space, they will go out into the community and use what's there. So I just wanted to put that out there as, if it really doesn't work for the developer to meet our current standards for the private outdoor space, it could work in our favor to get people to activate these spaces that we're creating.
I agree with that. People never use the balconies. All these buildings have balconies. You never see anybody out on them. Occasionally junk will be stored on them, but that's about the extent of it.
I see some use, but I wouldn't say they're greatly used.
Yeah. I actually would like to ask staff a question about that. What would be, I understand this is a PUD, but in the planning regulations, what are the requirements about swapping common open space for private open space?
I'm not sure I can tell you the exact numbers off the top of my head, but actually, thank you for this opportunity, because I did want to clarify one thing that the applicant said. The open space requirement for residential does not necessarily mean that every unit has to have a balcony. If it, if it's ground level, obviously it could be a deck, but there is both a private open space requirement, which is for each individual unit. I believe it's 60 square feet, and then there's also a common open space requirement for each unit, which I think, do you remember what that is? 20 square feet, something like that. Anyway, and what that means is common open space, of course, is like your podium courtyards, or your rooftop, your roof deck garden kind of thing that is available to all residents of the building, not to the general public, but to all residents of the building. And there is an ability to swap the private open space for the common open space. It's at a 2-to-1 ratio. So if you don't provide any private open space for an individual unit, then you have to provide an additional 120 square feet of common open space, for that unit in the common open space that's provided. So there's a number of different ways that it can be met, and we've told the applicant that if they are proposing to modify it, if they are not proposing to modify it, then this PUD will just be subject to the open space requirements as they are. If they are proposing to modify it, then they need to tell us exactly what the open space requirement would be if they were to meet it, and how they're proposing to modify that. So staff certainly would like to see that, and I think the commission would want to know that as well. But I would say, I think there are probably some opportunities for, first of all, for some balconies and some private open space for individual units, and there's also opportunities for some common open space. It most likely would end up being on the roofs, because I don't see where else they could put it, because there aren't any real podiums here, but there are some opportunities for that.
And that does bring up, just because we have the park setting doesn't, in my mind, doesn't mean that we should avoid having some courtyards or some common decks and balconies that overlook these parks. I think there'd be a nice interaction between individual building open spaces and the parks if they're visually connected.
May I make?
Go ahead.
May I make one other observation? I don't want to be a buzzkill here, because I don't disagree with the desirability of having another ramp to the bridge that would come to the south. But I think that train may have already left the station, so to speak. The dispute that we're in with the state about that money has to do with whether or not that bridge was really, I guess you'd call it an enforceable obligation in their lingo, meaning that it was ready to go. It was ready to be built. We didn't have a contract signed with a construction firm to build it, but we were just about there. I mean, the construction drawings have all been prepared with showing the ramp, just the one to the north. And the reason that it was designed that way was that, and that was years ago. At that time, Sherwin Williams was just a big vacant, contaminated site. We knew something was gonna happen with it eventually, but at that point, we had no ability to design something that would access the Sherwin Williams site. So the bridge got designed. It's all ready to go with the construction drawings, and if we finally win our court battle with the state, then hopefully we'll be able to take those construction drawings and go ahead and build the thing. But if we had to redesign it at this point to add another ramp, I think we may not be able to build it at all, frankly. So I just want to let you know that. Kind of a reality check here.
So with that in mind, is it designed, because like I said, this is so old, I can't even remember what the design looks like, but does it preclude adding a ramp as a second phase of the bridge?
Possibly not.
Yeah.
Possibly not. I mean, yeah.
It'd be total separate, different from the bridge, get the bridge done, build it, and then have the money to build this second ramp afterwards.
Yeah,
As a
that's
separate
sort
plan.
of what I was
I'm not an
envisioning.
engineer, obviously, but I think that could be, but that's possible. Something to consider, yeah.
All right, any other comments? All right, well, seeing none, then I think, I'll just make sure there's nothing else here. We have commissioner comments. So are there any comments?